A young woman rents a haunted house so that she can create her next set of paintings in a brand new style that she is seeking to discover, only to realize that the rumors were true. The house truly is haunted. Only she doesn't mind. As the weeks slip into months, she finds herself growing closer and closer to the entity within the house as they create their own little world in the dark. It's all magical and wonderful until it isn't. While Woman Falls for a mysterious yet dangerous entity may not sound like the most original concept, the Me You Love in the Dark adds so many layers to it that it becomes a rewarding examination of many different themes surrounding relationships. And it was created in such a way that you can really come at it from multiple angles. And we're going to take a look at one involving creativity and the creative process itself. And of course, you may have your own interpretations. It's gonna vary from person to person, and that's what's exciting. So there are some strong themes to explore and some beautiful macabre art to look at, and we're gonna be doing just that as we examine destructive creation in the Me You Love in the Dark. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's get cozy and spooky. The Me You Love in the Dark was a 5-issue miniseries written by Skottie with art by Jorge Corona, colors Jean-Francois Beaulieu. It was initially released monthly in late 2021, beginning in August. It was published through Image Comics with a trade being first released in 2022. It follows the story of Rowena, or Ro Meadows, who is a painter at the height of her success, coming off of a very acclaimed collection. While it was well received, she's now trying to figure out what she does next. What does she want to say as an artist? So she's kind of looking to change up her style. So she rents a slightly spooky looking house where she can work in complete isolation. The house has had some tragic happenings around it, and it's said to be haunted. But Ro's not bothered. In fact, she feels that makes it perfect. It's exactly what I'm looking for. So Ro settles in and gets into a routine that involves setting up her easel, getting some music, getting a glass of wine, sometimes usually more than a glass of wine, and trying, the key word being trying, to paint. The art's not happening. No matter how hard she tries, nothing is happening. In fact, for the entire first issue, Ro doesn't paint anything at all. And we're just left to watch her get more and more frustrated with herself. Oh, come on, just draw. A lot of this is demonstrated non-verbally, just through the art, which handles the heavy lifting with ease. And these moments of silence help to punctuate just how alone Ro is. And you can really feel it closing in on you. But is she actually alone? As time goes on, Ro starts to talk to the ghost that supposedly inhabits the house. You know, you could at least start the record and pour my wine for me. And if you're not gonna do that, at least give me some inspiration or something. Really, Ro, weeks of this and you have nothing? And you're no fun ghost. Good night. It's important to note that all the things she asks for, the ghost is gonna do. Now, eventually Ro's solitude is broken by a call from her agent and friend Addison, who also was looking over the gallery where her paintings are housed. And there's some pressure placed on her. It's been weeks and they want new pieces. People are relying on her. They're saying the gallery is gonna close if they don't have new pieces to put up and show eventually. This causes Ro to lash out at herself. Why can't you just do what you do? You're such a big shot artist, so try making not art. And it's after this breakdown, which also involved a lot of drinking, that she first hears the ghost. Ghost in quotes. Now I'm just a spoiled artiste renting ridiculous houses in the middle of nowhere, hoping to find myself, but it's not working. What do you say, ghost? Should I just pack it in and go back to being a barista?
No, you should
not. Oh, Things escalate after. Ro flees the home because, well, she's hearing voices. But she does eventually go back in, and when she does, she finds that everything is cleaned up, and on her easel is a note, and it says, "I'm sorry." And in what looks to be ink or paint are footsteps as the ghost reveals itself to be real. A fine setup for what will evolve into a gothic romance. The atmosphere is set. But those are the narrative elements. What about the thematic ones? Just what is the ghost or entity in terms of how it pertains to the story? It could be argued that the ghost could be likened to Ro's creative process, or the creative process in general, and then the relationship to Ro specifically, because everybody's relationship to the creative process is different. In this way, the ghost can be used to examine Ro's relationship with the ups and downs of being an artist, seeking inspiration, and how, depending upon where an artist is in their journey, the relationship between art and the process of creating it can be beautiful or destructive or both, and in some cases can just become flat out abusive. But in this case, we're gonna get to see that manifested as an actual relationship between Ro and the entity. So the ghost is not the art itself, or the art that she produces, and it's also not inspiration or the idea of a dark muse, but rather the process of creating art. This is of course on a metaphorical level. Story-wise, the entity still acts how it acts, but the actions can be interpreted through that lens. It is a well-spun metaphor because, like Rose's relationship with the entity, a person's relationship to creating art is just that, a relationship, even if it's not with an actual person. Now, the relationship that Rose has to her art and the process of creating it and how she comes to it is going to impact her relationship with the entity. It's already begun to, in the fact that she's already asked for certain things and the entity is going to provide. Rose is feeling lost and insecure despite being at the height of her game. She's isolated from people and self-medicating, and she's feeling stuck and burnt out. But she also feels that she has to produce something, and that pressure is mounting the longer she goes without making something. The ghost, or entity, first appears to Rose when she speaks of maybe giving up art, encouraging her not to give up on the process. It also writes an apology on her medium of choice, saying, "I'm sorry," which is ostensibly for frightening her and scaring her out of the house, but could also be read as that breakthrough moment when inspiration comes. And all of a sudden, engaging in the creative process feels worth it. Now, Rowena has much more interaction with the ghost moving forward, from issue 2 onwards. In issue 2, at the start of it, she must first come to terms with the fact that this entity is there in the house with her at all times, watching her. The entity describes itself as not a ghost and is exceedingly old, and is very caught up in her need to make art. Are you there?
If you like.
I think I would. This makes me happy.
Me too.
Rose details what she wants, how she's trying to create something new, create something real, but she's not sure what. So in a way, she's in a bit of a space where she's trying to force something. And this dark, literally, entity has entered the space, offering to help with the process. But it needs to be dark. At this point, Rose's isolation begins to further encroach upon her interior environment. We already saw that the house was empty and there were long scenes of her walking around it and there just not being anyone and no dialogue. But now we're also going to start to lose the light. Her environment will become shrouded in darkness as this entity begins to take up more and more of her life. Slowly, the entity will start to do things that she liked to do for herself, which are all things she listed off before it appeared to her. Pouring wine, setting up the music, getting the easel ready, pouring her coffee, all the little things. Now first, she herself seeks this darkness as she's seeing this entity as potentially a good thing. So she's looking for a darker place to paint and really embrace what's going on. But as this series goes on, darkness becomes something that the entity demands. But at first, she's inspired and she's finally able to paint something. The process is working. Now as this is occurring, her first successful painting, we're seeing the entity encroach upon her in a very intimate manner, mirroring the heady feeling that can come with the process of creation. It's these moments that are given even more focus than the end product itself, which is in and of itself a faceless image.
And it is beautiful.
It is quite significant that the creature is both monstrous and yet in its own way beautiful. It's haunting in an eldritch horror kind of way. And for a while, Rose gives herself to this creature. And yes, in all the ways that you can imagine, the shape of water up in here with eldritch entities. And for a while, it's good, or seems to be. She's painting, she's having fun, she's where she thinks she should be, things are happening. But we, the reader, can see that things aren't right. Everything is darkness. She's still drinking way too much. She's totally isolated and trapped in a routine. She's starting to do things over and over again at the entity's behest, like watch the same movie over and over. And all of these things are still inside this environment. She's not leaving. Even the breaks she's taking are inside of this house. She's never far from the entity or from her work. And a lot of these repetitious activities and the encouragement of some of her poor coping mechanisms are starting to come at the behest of the entity. So regardless of what's going on, she's still fully immersed in the process. But cracks start to appear, like in issue 3, which is largely the honeymoon phase of their relationship.
Why are you upset? Does making cookies make everyone upset?
No, I just thought, I don't know, maybe I'd be making cookies with my own kids someday.
You would like to have children?
No, I mean, maybe, but not now. I chose the strange path of being an artist or whatever, and I love discovering what it has in store for me along the way. like you. Ro is essentially given all control to the creative process, not even giving herself time to think about other alternatives. You can hear it in the way she's talked about it. She's just giving herself over to it. Not that she has to want a family or children, but she doesn't give herself the agency in this relationship. The art is just taking her where it will, using her. Her control has been taken away, and this can also be seen in how the entity begins to take more and more control away from her, controlling her, becoming abusive. By issue 4, we learn that Ro has been in this house for months, and she's starting to think about maybe leaving, maybe going out, just getting a coffee. But the entity won't let her. First, with emotional manipulation. Like when she decides to finally plan to make a trip to go out, the entity decides to make a huge spread of her favorite foods, under the guise of being nice and kind, but really it's a way to keep her in the house, because it knew that she was planning to go somewhere and then engineered a situation that would make her feel guilty or bad about leaving. It's also a very good echo of an actual abusive relationship between two people, in that sometimes these moments happen and one can't tell if it's manipulation or if it's genuine kindness. It's the kind of thing that messes with your head, it trips you up. Now Ro is once more burnt out, only now in a different way. Whereas before it was because she wasn't able to think of anything to do, now it's because she's having to constantly produce all the time and not getting any breaks. Paintings are being made, but she's not getting to leave the process, which she also couldn't leave before. The only difference is now work is happening. She's completely lost any work-life balance. She's being pushed to stay in this house all the time, and even goes on that she's not happy. She came here for herself, not to fall in love with some eldritch entity, which enrages it, and it lashes out, leaving her terrified. In a parallel to how she herself lashed out at herself when she felt she couldn't produce any art.
I'm so very sorry I lost my temper. My feelings for you are too powerful for me at times, and I cannot seem to hold them inside. I will improve if you will allow me the time. Will you help me love you better?
Yes, I will. We see Ro descend in this issue into moments of rebellion, tearing down the curtains. But she more than feels trapped by the entity now. She is trapped. It is now physically keeping her inside the house. And ultimately, what does she do? She stays and paints more. It's become her entire world. Her first contact with another person physically comes in the form of Addison, who comes to check on her because he's worried about her. And then we get the reveal that she's painted enough paintings for 10 gallery shows. There is no shortage of art. So the agent is confused as to why she's still in the house. Wasn't the point that she needed to paint? Which is a good way to demonstrate two things. One, that the process can overtake and stop being about the art that is produced at the end, and instead it can just become about the mere process itself. One can become trapped in that, and the end product can in and of itself become secondary or less important. It's very interesting. It also can demonstrate that disconnect at times between business people and artistic people. It's an honest and fair question Addison is asking. But as we've seen, and those who are creative live and breathe, it's not just always about making money or meeting deadlines. There's also that feeling, the compulsion to create, the need to do it. Sometimes the compulsion existing even if the idea isn't fully present or fleshed out at the end. Ro certainly feels this and has been sucked in by it. All of the other societal pressure is creating a dark void around the process that the entity has risen to fill. That she was already falling into it at the start of this series. You could tell she was already breaking down even before the entity showed up. Also, we get a timeline that she's been at this for a year. It's also worth noting that her friend is kind of repulsed by the art that she's created. And we don't get to see what it is, but there's something about it that makes him feel uncomfortable, and he even asks if she's okay. Now, of course, things go full horror, as she tells Addison the entity will not let her leave. He won't let me?
Who? Someone else lives here? Who won't let you leave? Ro, tell me who's keeping you here.
The 5th issue allows us to see the entity at his most monstrous, as it tries to keep Ro in the house, painting, giving her all the things that she presented to it as needing to be happy and to create. Isolation, wine, music.
This is the me that you love, is it not?
Please. There's a truly unsettling moment when the entity uses her friend Addison's body as a puppet, trying to bring him back to life to cheer her up. It's gruesome. What the are you?
You know what I am. I am the something that loves you. The something that you love.
Well, I don't think she's going to enjoy making art very much after this. For after saying this, the entity once more tries to force her into the process of creating, saying he sees her better than she sees herself and that she needs him. He'll get all the things she needs to feel inspired by him once more.
You will paint. That is always what helps you see me.
The last issue really captures the essence of destructive creativity or creation. It does it so well as Ro paints while a demon literally lurks behind her, keeping her trapped, plying her with wine, hurting her. And now, for the first time since the first painting, we get to see another painting that she's produced at the end of this entire ordeal, and it's nebulous and dark and inky, an abyss. She manages to flee and sets the house ablaze, just burning everything, including her paintings. Just everything from the process gone. Well, almost everything. We do see that one painting did survive. The first one that she made at the beginning. It's in an antique shop scuffed by all the flames. And as someone observes it, they say that they kind of like it, with absolutely no idea of anything that went into its creation, which is so often the case when it comes to works that are produced. There's often whole entire stories behind them that people will never know. It's left ambiguous as to whether Ro went on to paint more or not. I don't know if I would after all that. Sometimes things can happen that can just suck the joy out of creating things. Now, it must be noted that The Me You Love in the Dark can stand on its own as a more pure horror story or pure horror romance without going into all of the underlayers or metaphors or deeper analysis. But it lends itself to that and was designed that way on purpose. The artist Corona stated, "Dark and moody, this book is an exploration into love and relationships, the highs and the lows, where fantasy meets reality to show the darkest corners of human nature." And what type of relationship that is left open to interpretation. Some view this as a very good breakdown of the evolution of an abusive romantic relationship, while others may liken it to the relationship between artists and their art itself rather than the process of making it. However, in my readings of this work, it's the process of creation that was foregrounded the most, and it comes through in that the entity is meticulous in setting up the environment in which the art is to be made, rather than focusing as much on the outcome or the art itself. I remember that all the things that Ro herself asked for were presented by the entity, even though those things already weren't working. The story showcases how entering into the creative process with an unhealthy mindset and methodology can yield disastrous results, even if it sometimes seems to be working in terms of art being produced. There are moments in the story where Ro is in the zone, where Ro is having a good time, and everything is flowing. But even in those moments, she's descending. And the entity and his home represent that beautifully, creating this dark cave-like space where Ro can have anything except a healthy relationship with her creative workflow. Ro has no life balance, no friends, no space to interrogate what she wants out of life, or even what she truly wants to say with her art. She just knows that she has to create, and it's in that headspace that the entity manifests and makes itself known to her. The entity shows how one can produce plentiful or beautiful or disturbing art, but that it's important to keep track of just how the art is arising. What toll is it taking on the artist? And just because there's a lot of work or it's beautiful or meaningful doesn't mean that how it's coming about doesn't need to be examined. Because the relationship that an artist has with creating their art, if left unchecked, can quite quickly become toxic. And that can become rather akin to an abusive relationship. Even just the mentality of needing to create all the time, no breaks, get in the zone, do the thing. Reward yourself with things, but only if they fit into the pattern, and make sure that more work is being done. Seek out self-medication, even in dangerous amounts, because it could open your mind. Look for anything to provide inspiration. It can become truly toxic, and all of that is showcased in this work in a very fun and interesting and non-pedantic way. It's also not judgmental about it. Now, of course, this is a metaphorical look and not an allegorical one. Your creative process won't literally murder your friend and wear him as a skin suit, but it could figuratively destroy friendships or relationships through things like neglect or an unhealthy headspace pushing someone away, both of which Ro does to Addison. The element of getting frustrated at the entity and feeling trapped also works well with the job element of creating art as presented in the story. Ro not only likes creating art, she has to. It's her job. And so the resentment that she also feels towards it rings true. And also all the pressure that she's heaping onto herself. The fact that all of this is happening while she is alone perfectly encapsulates how so many of these struggles happen entirely in one's own mindscape, and someone outside looking in would never know. Again, this is a metaphorical read. In the narrative, these things are not in her mind. The entity is both monstrous and alluring, tempting yet repellent, just as the process of being truly immersed in one's work can be. It can become all things, and it can become very difficult to break away. Now, regardless of how one reads it, it's a strong and haunting, pun fully intended, story. Also, the writer did rent an Airbnb to just sit down and power through writing this, which is worth noting, but also it only took him a week. This did not happen to him, at least not in this way. Although there are also some interviews he's done talking about wanting to do something different and feeling a bit not burnt out, but wanting to shift gears after creating Middle West, which was the comic that he did before this, which dealt with generational abuse and magic. Now, it must be noted, as always, that this work will not be for everyone. It moves slowly, although less so when you read it all in trades. afraid. And it's the type of work that if one doesn't engage with it on a deeper level, it may not pack as much of a punch, and it could come across as more run-of-the-mill because you're dealing with your standard, oh, woman rents a house, falls in love with a dark spirit, traditional tragic romance story. And so if one isn't dealing in those deeper elements, it may not feel as novel or interesting. However, I would argue that even without a deeper look at some of the themes, the art and panel flow and use of textless storytelling really elevate this one. It's a strong horror outing and a cautionary tale to all creators out there to beware the headspace they're in when they buckle down to create, lest some ancient entity come and take advantage. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours, especially about something like this, because it could be interpreted again in so many ways. I want to hear yours. Is this what you thought the entity in the story represented? Is this what you got out of the story? What's your read on it? Did you read this one? Are you just leaving your house as soon as a ghost starts talking to you? Come on, what's your interpretation? I'd love to hear it. Or if you entirely disagree with mine, I want to hear that too. Please share down below. I love chatting with you. And while you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Please hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to spend it discussing comics with me. I really appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.